Alara lived in a small cabin nestled beside a whispering creek. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on her worn wooden door. Inside, the air smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke. She wasn't a doctor like in the fancy towns back east. Alara was a healer, a frontier woman who knew the secrets of the plants that grew wild around her. She could mend a broken bone with splints and poultices, soothe a fever with willow bark tea, and stop bleeding with spiderwebs and yarrow. Her days were usually quiet. She tended her small garden, collected herbs in the forest, and helped the few settlers who lived nearby when they were sick or injured. Alara liked the solitude. It gave her time to think, to study her books, and to listen to the whispers of the wind in the trees. She wore simple clothes, usually a long brown dress and a sturdy apron. Her hands were rough but gentle when she touched someone who was hurting. Her eyes, the color of the summer sky, held a deep understanding of the world and its ways. Most folks thought she was a bit strange, living alone out there. But they also knew she was kind and that she had a gift. They might whisper behind her back about her knowledge of herbs and old wives' tales, but when they were truly in need, they came to Alara's door. She didn't ask for much in return. A few eggs, some fresh milk, or a helping hand in her garden was usually enough. Alara believed in helping others, and she knew that even in this wild and untamed land, people needed to look out for each other. Little did she know, this quiet life was about to be shattered by a desperate plea and the arrival of a proud Apache warrior. The meeting would pull her into an adventure filled with danger, loyalty, and a surprising friendship. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple when Chaska appeared. He rode a powerful Appaloosa stallion, its coat dappled like a stormy sky. He was tall and lean, his face etched with the harsh lines of the desert wind and sun. His eyes, dark and piercing, scanned the clearing around Alara's cabin with suspicion. He wore buckskin breeches and a simple tunic, adorned with feathers and beads. A quiver of arrows hung at his back, and a long knife was strapped to his thigh. He was the very image of a fierce Apache warrior. Chaska dismounted with a fluid grace, his movements silent and controlled. He approached Alara's cabin slowly, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. He didn't speak, but his eyes held a desperate plea that cut through the distance between them. Alara, who had been tending her herb garden, straightened up, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen Apache warriors before, but never one so close, never one who looked so desperate. She stood her ground, her own eyes meeting his without flinching. She knew that fear would be a weakness he could exploit. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice calm despite the tremor in her hands. Chaska finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant, with a slight accent that was both unfamiliar and strangely compelling. "My filly, she is sick, dying, I need your help." He spoke the words carefully, as if unused to asking for assistance. He gestured towards the edge of the woods, where a small, trembling figure stood hidden among the trees. It was a young Mustang, barely more than a foal, its coat the color of cream and its eyes wide with pain. This was Star, and her life hung precariously in the balance. The encounter was destined to change both their lives forever. Alara hesitated only for a moment. Despite the inherent distrust between settlers and Apache, she couldn't turn away from a creature in need. "Bring her closer," she said, gesturing towards the small clearing in front of her cabin. "I'll see what I can do." Chaska nodded, relief flickering across his face like a brief sunrise. He moved with surprising gentleness, coaxing the trembling filly out of the trees. Star stumbled weakly, her legs unsteady beneath her. As they drew closer, Alara could see the dullness in the filly's eyes, the shallow, rapid breaths, and the telltale tremors that racked her small body. Something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" Alara asked, her voice sharp and focused now, all thoughts of fear pushed aside. "She grazed near the creek this morning," Chaska replied, his voice tight with worry. "I think poison." He used the word with difficulty, as if admitting a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself. Alara knelt beside Star, her experienced hands gently running over the filly's coat, feeling for signs of injury or illness. The Mustang flinched at her touch, but Chaska murmured soothing words in his own language, and the filly seemed to relax slightly. Alara's heart sank. The symptoms were clear. Star had indeed ingested something poisonous and time was running out. "I need to examine her inside," Alara said, standing up and turning towards her cabin. "Bring her inside." "And you," she added, turning back to Chaska, "you can wait outside, my cabin is small." She paused, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. "Unless you don't trust me." The challenge hung in the air between them, a test of his intentions and his desperation. Chaska's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He understood Alara's caution. Trust was a rare and precious thing in this land, easily broken and hard to mend. He carefully guided Star into the cabin, the filly's hooves clattering softly on the wooden floor. Alara quickly cleared a space near the hearth, spreading a thick blanket for Star to lie on. The cabin, usually filled with the comforting scent of herbs, now carried a faint, sickly sweet odor that made Alara's stomach churn. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Alara moved quickly and efficiently, her years of experience guiding her. She examined Star's gums, noting their pale color. She listened to her heartbeat, which was rapid and weak. She checked the filly's temperature, finding it dangerously high. The symptoms all pointed to a potent poison, something fast-acting and deadly. "It's bad," Alara said, her voice grim. "Very bad. I need to find out what she ingested. Do you know what kind of plants grow near the creek?" Chaska frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There is wolfsbane and some nightshade, I think." I was not paying close attention. Alara's heart sank further. Wolfsbane was a particularly nasty poison, known for its swift and agonizing effects. Nightshade wasn't much better. She needed to act fast, and she needed to know which poison she was fighting. "I need to prepare an antidote," she said, already moving towards her shelves of dried herbs. "But I need to know for sure which one it is." "We don't have much time." The race against the poison had begun. Star's life and perhaps the fragile peace between a healer and a warrior hung in the balance. "I need your help," Alara said, her voice firm despite the anxiety swirling inside her. "I need you to go back to the creek, find the plant she ate. Bring me a sample, be careful though, don't touch it with your bare hands, use a cloth or a piece of bark." Chaska nodded, his face grim. He understood the urgency. Without the right antidote, Star was doomed. He turned and slipped out of the cabin, disappearing into the darkness as silently as a shadow. Alara, alone with the ailing filly, began to prepare a general detoxifying potion. She mixed charcoal powder with water, hoping to absorb some of the poison in Star's stomach. She then ground ginger root and added it to the mixture, knowing it would help soothe the filly's upset digestive system. All the while, she kept a close watch on Star, monitoring her breathing and her rapidly weakening pulse. She spoke softly to the filly, murmuring words of comfort and encouragement. "Hold on, little one," she whispered, stroking Star's soft muzzle. "We're going to get you through this." She knew that words alone wouldn't save Star, but she hoped that her presence, her touch, would somehow offer the filly a small measure of comfort in her pain. The minutes stretched into an eternity as Alara waited for Chaska to return. Each tick of the clock felt like a hammer blow, driving home the reality of Star's desperate situation. The cabin was filled with the cloying scent of poison and the rhythmic rasp of Star's labored breathing. Alara could only hope that Chaska would return in time, and that she would have the knowledge and the skill to save the little Mustang's life. The alliance, however tense and fragile, was now the only thing standing between Star and death. Finally, Chaska returned, his face illuminated by the lamplight as he stepped back into the cabin. He held out a piece of bark, carefully wrapped around a cluster of dark green leaves and purple flowers. "Wolfsbane," he said, his voice tight with relief. "I am sure of it." Alara examined the plant closely, her heart sinking. Wolfsbane was one of the most difficult poisons to treat. She knew she had a long night ahead of her. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did well." She immediately began preparing the antidote. First, she brewed a strong tea from comfrey root, known for its ability to soothe inflammation and protect the lining of the stomach. Then, she carefully measured out a dose of belladonna, a powerful herb that, in small quantities, could counteract the effects of wolfsbane on the nervous system. She knew that the dosage had to be precise. Too much belladonna could be just as deadly as the wolfsbane itself. With trembling hands, she mixed the comfrey tea and the belladonna extract, adding a touch of honey to make it more palatable. She then gently lifted Star's head and, using a small horn spoon, carefully poured the mixture down her throat. The filly coughed and gagged, but Alara persisted, patiently coaxing her to swallow. Once the antidote was administered, Alara turned her attention to supporting Star's weakened body. She prepared a poultice of mustard seed and cayenne pepper, applying it to the filly's chest to stimulate her circulation. She also brewed a weak broth from bone marrow, hoping to provide her with some much-needed nutrients. The hours passed slowly, filled with quiet desperation and the unwavering hope that her knowledge and skill would be enough to save Star's life. The fate of the filly and the budding trust between the healer and the warrior now rested on the success of her remedies. Chaska remained outside, a silent sentinel guarding the cabin. He built a small fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on his face. He didn't speak, but Alara could sense his anxiety, his unwavering focus on the well-being of the little Mustang. Every now and then he would rise and peer through the window, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hope. As the night wore on, the tension between them slowly began to ease. Alara, exhausted but determined, would occasionally step outside to update Chaska on Star's condition. Their conversations were brief and to the point, but in those few words, a grudging respect began to blossom. Chaska marveled at Alara's knowledge of herbs and her unwavering dedication to healing. Alara, in turn, saw past Chaska's fierce exterior and recognized the deep love and protectiveness he felt for Star. Once, as Alara was changing Star's poultice, Chaska hesitantly offered her a piece of dried meat. "For strength," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. Alara accepted the offering with a nod, appreciating the gesture. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes about the growing bond between them. As dawn approached, Star's condition began to stabilize. Her breathing became more regular, her pulse stronger. The tremors that had racked her body subsided, and a faint spark of life returned to her eyes. Alara knew that she wasn't out of the woods yet, but she had turned a corner. She had fought the poison and won. Stepping outside, Alara looked at Chaska, her face etched with exhaustion but also with a sense of quiet triumph. "She's going to make it," she said, her voice soft with relief. "She's still weak, but the worst is over." A slow smile spread across Chaska's face, a rare and beautiful sight. The shared ordeal had forged a connection between them, a fragile alliance built on trust, respect, and a mutual love for a small, cream-colored Mustang. But their story was far from over. A new challenge awaited them, one that would test their newfound bond and push them to the limits of their courage and skill. The next few days were spent nursing Star back to health. Alara continued to administer herbal tonics and kept a close watch on the filly's progress. Chaska, no longer the stoic warrior, became a gentle caretaker, tending to Star's every need. He brushed her coat until it gleamed, brought her fresh water from the spring, and fed her handfuls of sweet grass. The bond between them was undeniable, a silent language of love and devotion that transcended words. Star, in turn, responded to Chaska's care with unwavering affection. She would nuzzle him gently, her soft muzzle pressing against his cheek. She would follow him around the clearing, her small hooves padding softly on the ground. It was clear that she saw him as her protector, her friend, her family. Alara watched them with a mixture of admiration and envy. She had never experienced such a deep connection with an animal or with anyone for that matter. Her life had been one of solitude and self-reliance, and she had often wondered if she was missing out on something. Seeing the bond between Chaska and Star made her question her choices, made her yearn for a connection of her own. As Star grew stronger, she began to explore the clearing around Alara's cabin. She would gallop and prance, her cream-colored coat shimmering in the sunlight. She would chase butterflies and nibble at the wildflowers, her joy infectious. It was as if she was celebrating her second chance at life, embracing every moment with unbridled enthusiasm. One afternoon, as Alara was watching Star frolic in the meadow, Chaska approached her, his face serious. "I owe you a debt, Alara," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You saved Star's life, I will not forget it." He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers. "But there is something else, something I need your help with." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The respite was over. The adventure was about to begin. Alara waited, her heart pounding in her chest. She had a feeling she wasn't going to like what Chaska was about to say. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Chaska took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "My brother," he said, his voice heavy with pain. "Kohan, he has been taken." "Oh, taken?" Alara asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "By whom?" "Bandits," Chaska replied, his voice filled with rage. "They raided our village 3 days ago. They took Kohan, along with some of our horses and supplies." "Oh, Alara's heart went out to him. She knew how much family meant to the Apache. To lose a brother was a devastating blow. "I'm so sorry, Chaska," she said, her voice filled with compassion. "But what do you want me to do?" "I'm a healer, not a warrior." "I know where they took him," Chaska said, his eyes burning with determination. "Their hideout is in the Black Rock Canyon a few days' ride from here, but I cannot go alone, there are too many of them." "I need your help." Alara stared at him in disbelief. "My help," she repeated. "What could I possibly do?" "You know the land," Chaska said, his voice persuasive. "You know the plants, the animals, the hidden trails. You can help me track them, find their weaknesses. And," he added, his gaze softening, "you have a kind heart, Alara. Kohan is young and scared. He needs someone to care for him, to heal his wounds, both physical and emotional." Alara hesitated. She had spent her life avoiding conflict, seeking solace in the quiet solitude of the forest. The thought of facing ruthless bandits filled her with dread. But she couldn't deny the desperate plea in Chaska's eyes, the unwavering determination to save his brother. And she couldn't forget the debt she owed him, the fragile alliance they had forged in the face of adversity. She knew deep down that she couldn't turn him away. The adventure, whether she wanted it or not, had truly begun. Alara spent a sleepless night wrestling with her conscience. The image of Kohan, a young boy held captive by ruthless bandits, haunted her dreams. She knew the dangers of the Black Rock Canyon, a desolate and unforgiving landscape known for its treacherous terrain and lawless inhabitants. She also knew that Chaska, despite his warrior skills, would be outnumbered and outgunned. In the morning, she found Chaska tending to Star, his face etched with worry and determination. He didn't pressure her, didn't plead or beg. He simply waited, his eyes filled with a quiet hope that tugged at her heartstrings. Alara took a deep breath and made her decision. "I'll help you," she said, her voice firm and resolute, "but we need to be smart about this. We can't just ride in their guns blazing, we need a plan." Chaska's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Alara," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I knew I could count on you." And so the unlikely alliance was forged. Alara, the frontier healer, and Chaska, the Apache warrior, were now united by a common goal: to rescue Kohan and bring him home. They spent the rest of the day preparing for their journey. Alara gathered her herbs and medicines, packing them carefully into saddlebags. She also prepared a potent sleeping draught, knowing that it might come in handy. Chaska sharpened his knives and arrows, ensuring that his weapons were ready for battle. He also taught Alara some basic self-defense techniques, showing her how to use a knife and how to protect herself in a fight. As they worked side by side, their respect for each other deepened. Alara admired Chaska's strength and his unwavering loyalty to his family. Chaska, in turn, was impressed by Alara's intelligence and her willingness to risk her own safety to help someone in need. The journey ahead would be dangerous and challenging, but they knew that they were stronger together than they were apart. Their cross-cultural partnership, born of desperation and forged in trust, was about to be put to the ultimate test. That evening, huddled around a crackling fire, Alara and Chaska laid out their plan. Chaska knew the general location of the bandit hideout in Black Rock Canyon, but Alara knew the canyon itself. She had explored its hidden trails and secret passages as a child, gathering herbs and escaping the loneliness of her life. The main entrance is heavily guarded, Alara explained, tracing a line on the dirt with a stick. But there's a back way, a narrow passage that leads through a series of caves. It's dangerous and easy to get lost, but it's our best chance of getting in undetected. Chaska listened intently, his dark eyes focused on the map Alara was drawing. "How long will it take to reach this passage?" he asked. 2 days, maybe 3, Alara replied. "We'll have to travel light and fast, and we'll need to be careful. The bandits have scouts everywhere." Chaska nodded. "I will scout ahead," he said. "I will move like the wind, unseen and unheard." Alara then turned her attention to the bandits themselves. "What do you know about them?" she asked. "How many are there? What kind of weapons do they have?" Chaska frowned. "They are led by a man named Snake Miller," he said. "He is a cruel and ruthless man. There are about 20 bandits in his gang. They have guns, knives, and a few horses." "Oh, that's guns," Alara said, her voice thoughtful. "That's a problem. We'll need to rely on stealth and surprise. I have a sleeping draft that can knock a man out for hours. We can use that to our advantage." Together, they pieced together a plan that combined Alara's knowledge of the land with Chaska's warrior skills. They would approach the canyon cautiously, using the hidden passage to infiltrate the bandit camp. Alara would use her sleeping draft to incapacitate some of the guards, while Chaska would use his stealth and fighting skills to take out the rest. Their goal was not to kill, but to rescue Kohan and escape undetected. It was a risky plan, fraught with danger, but it was their only hope. As they finalized their strategy, the moon rose high in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. The journey ahead would be long and perilous, but Alara and Chaska were ready. They were bound by a shared purpose, a fragile alliance forged in the fires of adversity. The journey to Black Rock Canyon was arduous. The landscape transformed from rolling hills and green meadows into a harsh and unforgiving desert. Towering rock formations cast long, eerie shadows, and the air was thick with the smell of dust and sagebrush. The sun beat down mercilessly and water was scarce. Alara, used to the cool shade of the forest, found the heat unbearable. Her skin burned, her lips cracked, and her throat was constantly parched. Chaska, accustomed to the desert climate, fared better, but even he showed signs of weariness. They rode in silence for the most part, communicating through gestures and brief whispers. Chaska scouted ahead, his keen eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. He taught Alara how to read the tracks in the sand, how to identify the signs of a recent passage, and how to avoid being seen. One evening, as they were making camp near a dry creek bed, they spotted buzzards circling overhead. Chaska frowned. "Something is dead nearby," he said. "We must be careful, there may be scavengers." They cautiously approached the area, their senses on high alert. They soon discovered the carcass of a wild horse, its body riddled with arrows. Chaska examined the arrows closely. "These are not Apache arrows," he said. "These are bandit arrows." "They are close." Alara's heart pounded in her chest. They were getting closer to the bandit hideout, and the danger was mounting. She knew that they had to be prepared for anything. As they continued their journey, Alara began to appreciate Chaska's knowledge and skills. He was a master of survival, able to find water in the most arid places and to navigate by the stars. He was also a skilled hunter, able to provide them with food even in the most barren landscapes. She realized that she could not have made this journey without him. Their unlikely alliance was not only a means to an end, but a testament to the power of cross-cultural understanding and cooperation. The challenges they faced were not just physical, but also a test of their bond and their commitment to each other's safety. Black Rock Canyon was drawing near, and with it, the true test of their courage and their friendship. As they neared Black Rock Canyon, Chaska became even more cautious. He insisted that they travel only at night, using the darkness as their cloak. During the day, they hid in caves and behind rock formations, carefully observing the movements of the bandits. One evening, while Alara was gathering herbs near their hiding place, she overheard a group of bandits talking. They were boasting about their raid on Chaska's village, laughing about the terror they had inflicted on the women and children. They spoke of Snake Miller, their leader, with a mixture of fear and admiration. They described him as a heartless killer who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Alara's blood ran cold. She realized that these were not just ordinary thieves. They were ruthless and cruel, capable of anything. She knew that the danger was far greater than she had imagined. She rushed back to Chaska, her face pale with fear. "They're worse than we thought," she whispered. "They're not just after horses and supplies, they enjoy hurting people. They're evil." Chaska's face hardened. "I knew this," he said, his voice grim, "but now you understand. We must be even more careful. One mistake and we are both dead." They spent the rest of the night reviewing their plan, emphasizing the need for stealth and surprise. They knew that they could not afford to make any mistakes. The bandits were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Their only hope was to move like shadows, to strike swiftly and silently, and to disappear before they could be detected. Kohan's life and their own depended on it. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread that hung heavy in the night. They were about to enter the lion's den, and they had no idea what awaited them inside. Under the cover of darkness, Alara and Chaska began their infiltration. Alara led the way, her knowledge of the hidden passage proving invaluable. The caves were dark and damp, filled with bats and the echoing sound of dripping water. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and dust. As they neared the bandit camp, Alara stopped. "I'll create a diversion," she whispered. "There's a patch of stinging nettles growing near the main gate. I'll burn them. The smoke will irritate their eyes and lungs, creating confusion." Chaska nodded, his face grim. "Be careful," he said. "I will be waiting." Alara crept towards the main gate, her heart pounding in her chest. She gathered a handful of dry leaves and twigs, placing them near the stinging nettles. She then struck a flint, igniting the leaves. The fire quickly spread to the nettles, releasing a thick, acrid smoke that billowed towards the bandit camp. Coughs and curses erupted from within the camp. Bandits stumbled out of their tents, rubbing their eyes and gasping for air. In the chaos, Chaska moved swiftly and silently, like a shadow in the night. He used his knife to disable the guards, striking them with precision and speed. He didn't kill them, but he rendered them unconscious, ensuring that they wouldn't raise the alarm. Alara, her eyes watering from the smoke, joined Chaska near the main gate. "Where do they keep the prisoners?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the din. "In the old mine shaft," Chaska replied, pointing towards a dark opening in the side of the canyon wall. "It is heavily guarded." They moved towards the mine shaft, their senses on high alert. The smoke had created a distraction, but they knew that it wouldn't last long. They had to find Kohan and get out of there before the bandits realized what was happening. The Alliance, tested by fire and smoke, now faced its most dangerous trial. The rescue hinged on their ability to work together, to combine Alara's knowledge of herbs with Chaska's warrior skills, and to trust each other completely. Two heavily armed bandits guarded the entrance to the mine shaft. They were alert and wary, their eyes scanning the darkness. Chaska signaled to Alara to stay back. He would handle this. Moving with lightning speed, Chaska launched two arrows, each striking a guard in the throat. The bandits crumpled to the ground without a sound. Alara rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The mine shaft was dark and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Alara lit a torch, casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn walls. They moved cautiously through the tunnel, their senses on high alert. They soon reached a small chamber where several prisoners were being held. Among them was Kohan, a young boy with wide, frightened eyes. He was thin and pale, his clothes torn and dirty. "Kohan," Chaska cried, rushing towards his brother. Kohan looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Chaska," he whispered, "is it really you?" "Yes, little brother," Chaska said, embracing him tightly. "I have come to take you home." Alara quickly unlocked the prisoners' chains, freeing them from their captivity. She gave Kohan some water and a piece of dried meat, urging him to eat slowly. "We have to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "The bandits will be back soon." They led the prisoners out of the mine shaft and back towards the hidden passage. As they emerged from the caves, they were met by a group of bandits, their faces contorted with rage. The diversion had worn off, and they had discovered the escape. "Stop!" Snake Miller roared, his voice echoing through the canyon. "You're not going anywhere." A fierce battle erupted. Chaska fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf, his knife a blur of motion. Alara used her knowledge of herbs to create distractions, throwing handfuls of stinging nettles and pepper seeds into the faces of the bandits. Despite their efforts, they were outnumbered and outgunned. They knew that they couldn't hope to win this fight. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and Chaska cried out in pain, clutching his shoulder. Alara saw a crimson stain spreading across his tunic. She knew she had to act fast. "Get the prisoners to safety," she shouted to Chaska, pulling him towards a nearby rock formation. "I'll cover you." Alara, armed with nothing but her knowledge of herbs and her determination to protect her friends, stood her ground against the bandits. She threw handfuls of pepper seeds into their faces, temporarily blinding them. She used her sling to hurl rocks, striking them with surprising accuracy. She even managed to disarm one bandit, sending his gun flying through the air. But it was a losing battle. The bandits were closing in, their guns raised and ready to fire. Alara knew that she couldn't hold them off much longer. Just then, Chaska, his shoulder bandaged with a makeshift poultice of yarrow and spiderwebs that Alara had quickly applied, rejoined the fight. He moved with a renewed ferocity, his eyes burning with rage. He used his knife to disable the bandits, striking them with deadly precision. Kohan, seeing his brother in danger, grabbed a rock and hurled it at a bandit, striking him in the head. The bandit crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Together they fought side by side, their courage and determination inspiring the other prisoners to join the fight. They used rocks, sticks, and anything else they could find to defend themselves. The tide of the battle began to turn. The bandits, surprised by the prisoners' resistance, began to lose their nerve. They had expected an easy victory, but they were now facing a force that was fueled by love, loyalty, and a fierce determination to survive. Finally, Snake Miller, seeing that he was losing, ordered his men to retreat. The bandits scattered, disappearing into the darkness. Alara, Chaska, Kohan, and the other prisoners stood their ground, their bodies aching, their clothes torn, but their spirits unbroken. They had faced death and survived. As the dust settled, Alara surveyed the scene. The battle was over, but the aftermath was grim. Several prisoners were injured, and Chaska was still weak from his wound. She knew that they needed to get out of the canyon as soon as possible. "We need to leave," she said, her voice firm. It's not safe here. The bandits could return at any moment. They gathered their belongings and began the long trek back to Alara's cabin. The journey was slow and arduous, but they pressed on, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had succeeded. As they walked, Alara reflected on the events of the past few days. She had come to the canyon seeking only to help Chaska rescue his brother, but she had found something much more valuable, a sense of purpose and a connection to others. She had learned that teamwork and cross-cultural understanding were essential for survival. She had seen how her knowledge of herbs and Chaska's warrior skills could be combined to achieve a common goal. And she had discovered that even the most unlikely of alliances could be forged in the fires of adversity. Chaska, walking beside her, nodded in agreement. "We could not have done this alone," he said, his voice low and sincere. "We needed each other. We are stronger together than we are apart." Kohan, walking between them, smiled. He had witnessed the power of their alliance firsthand, and he knew that it was something special. He had seen how Alara, a white woman, and Chaska, an Apache warrior, had put aside their differences to help each other. He had learned that friendship and loyalty were more important than race or culture. As they walked towards the horizon, Alara knew that their journey had changed them forever. They had faced danger and adversity, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. They had proven that teamwork and cross-cultural understanding could overcome any obstacle. The bandits were defeated, but the true victory lay in the bonds they had forged along the way. The return journey to Alara's cabin was filled with a quiet sense of gratitude. Kohan, still recovering from his ordeal, clung to Chaska's side, his eyes filled with a newfound appreciation for his brother's bravery. Chaska, in turn, watched over Kohan with a fierce protectiveness, his heart overflowing with love. As they neared the cabin, they saw a familiar figure standing in the clearing. It was Star, her cream-colored coat gleaming in the sunlight. She whinnied with delight as she recognized Chaska and Kohan, galloping towards them with unbridled joy. Kohan ran towards Star, throwing his arms around her neck. "Star," he cried. "I missed you so much." Star nuzzled Kohan gently, her soft muzzle pressing against his cheek. It was a touching reunion, a testament to the deep bond between the boy and his beloved filly. Chaska turned to Alara, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alara," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You have given me back my brother. I will never forget your kindness." Alara smiled. "You're welcome, Chaska," she said. "I'm just glad that I could help." They reached the cabin, and Alara set about tending to Chaska's wound and caring for the other prisoners. She used her knowledge of herbs to soothe their aches and pains, and she provided them with food and shelter. As the days passed, the prisoners gradually recovered from their ordeal. They shared stories of their captivity, and they expressed their gratitude to Alara and Chaska for saving their lives. Before they left, the prisoners presented Alara and Chaska with gifts: handmade blankets, carved wooden figures, and baskets filled with fresh fruit. They were small tokens of appreciation, but they represented something much larger: a newfound respect and understanding between different cultures. As the prisoners rode away, Chaska turned to Alara, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "It is time for us to return to our village," he said. "But I will never forget you, Alara. You are my friend." Alara smiled. "And you are mine, Chaska," she said. "I will never forget you either." They embraced one last time, their hearts filled with a bittersweet mixture of joy and sorrow. They knew that their paths might never cross again, but they would always cherish the memories of their shared adventure. The unlikely alliance, born of desperation and forged in trust, had come to an end, but the lessons they had learned and the bonds they had formed would last a lifetime. Alara stood in front of her cabin, watching as Chaska, Kohan, and Star disappeared into the distance. A wave of sadness washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. Her life had changed forever. She was no longer the solitary healer, content with her quiet existence. She had experienced adventure, danger, and friendship, and she had discovered a strength and courage within herself that she never knew existed. She looked around her cabin, her eyes lingering on the familiar objects that had once defined her life. Her books, her herbs, her simple furniture, they were all still there, but they no longer held the same significance. She had learned that true happiness wasn't found in solitude, but in connection with others. She had discovered that friendship could transcend cultural differences, and that loyalty and compassion were more powerful than prejudice and fear. She smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. She had been given a gift, a chance to see the world through different eyes and to understand the value of human connection. She knew that her life would never be the same. She would continue to heal the sick and injured, but she would also seek out opportunities to connect with others, to bridge the gaps between cultures, and to promote understanding and compassion. She walked into her cabin, her steps lighter and more purposeful than ever before. She picked up her favorite book, a collection of ancient healing remedies, and began to read, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Chaska, Kohan, and Star. She knew that they were safe and that they would always be a part of her life, even though they were miles apart. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the valley, Alara closed her book and looked out the window. She saw the stars twinkling in the night sky and she smiled. She was no longer alone. She had found her place in the world and she knew that her journey had just begun. The frontier healer, once content in her solitude, now understood the true meaning of friendship and the importance of building bridges between different worlds.